Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. The bottle slipped and burst against the sink. Foam climbed my wrists, his screen blinked on the counter. 3 words glowed in preview: "After bedtime, babe." I wiped my hands on my shirt and reached. He snatched the phone first, breath tight. "I am Mara, 32, a month past delivery." My chest felt hollow and buzzing like a wasp nest. He smiled without teeth and tipped his head. "Work thing, go rest." My knees loosened, but the message burned. "Show me," my voice came out thin and flat. He flipped the screen face down with 2 fingers. "Privacy keeps us sane." His jaw worked once. I picked up the broken ring from the bottle cap. The baby whimpered in the next room, waiting. He stepped away and turned on the tap. Water roared like a curtain I could not push through. Another ping slipped under it, quick and bright. He dried his hand slowly and kissed my forehead. His lips tasted like mint and distance. I carried the baby to my shoulder and rocked. I counted my breaths out loud to keep steady. Behind me, he slid the phone into his pocket. The corner of the case flashed red near his belt. My gut stung like a scraped knee raw. "Who is she?" The baby hiccuped against my collarbone. "No one." He opened a cabinet and fumbled for tea. "You need sleep." He did not meet my eyes. I heard a whisper from his pocket and froze. His thumb killed the sound like a hunter. I set the baby down and reached for his jeans. He blocked with a gentle elbow and a tiny laugh. "You are spiraling." His voice sounded soft and rehearsed. "Let me make chamomile and we can reset." I watched the pocket like it had teeth. The kettle clicked. He kept his back to me. Steam rose and the phone hummed again. My ribs pulled tight as if laced from inside. I remembered my therapist saying, "Count the proof." 1, 2, 3. My hands would not stop. He brought the mug over and placed it carefully. "Drink." He moved the cup closer to my fingers. I pushed it away and knocked the spoon hard. Metal clattered across tile and under the fridge. His flinch answered something I had not asked. "Unlock it and end this." My voice stayed level. His eyes flicked to the nursery like a threat. "Let's not wake her. We are both exhausted." He lifted his mask of concern and wore it tight. He waited for me to choose quiet. I chose noise. I tapped the number I guessed twice. "Wrong code." He smiled with pity and a shrug. "Postpartum can twist thoughts, you know that." A damp chill crept up my back and stuck. The word postpartum became a chain. He reached for the phone and I kept it firm. "Give it." He spoke like the counselor from church. I stepped back and my heel hit a dropped pacifier. The baby stirred and gave a warning breath. We both looked toward the crib like sinners. He took the phone when I hesitated a second. His thumb moved fast and the preview vanished. I caught a red heart in the corner before black. He slipped the device into his pocket slow. My skin went cold and fully awake. "Do you love her?" My throat scraped on love. He laughed once and shook his head. "Do not be dramatic. It is a coworker." I heard the lie click and lock like a door. I pictured a hallway I would walk anyway. He reached for me and I stepped to the counter. The kettle hissed on low like a snake. He muted it and rubbed his eyes with his thumb. "Let me hold you and we will sleep." I thought of the preview ending after bedtime. I opened the drawer and pulled out a sticky note. "Write her name and we are done tonight." He stared at the note as if it could bite. He breathed in through his nose and waited. My hand shook and the pen left a blot. He took the pen but wrote nothing at all. "You should trust me if you want family." The word "want" scraped against my ribs and lodged. He tapped the counter twice and turned away. I pocketed the blank note like a receipt. In the nursery, the baby started a thin cry. He lifted his palms as if proving innocence. "Go, I will clean up and text the client." Text the client sat between us like a dare. I walked to the crib with a buzzing skull. I fed her while the hallway glowed with silence. From the kitchen came soft haptic bumps and pauses. I counted them like seconds underwater. The baby finished and turned her face into my palm. I stood and heard the hiss of a deleted thread. I lowered her back down and stepped into the hall. He pretended to wipe the counter with small circles. "We should plan a date night and reconnect soon." His tone felt like a lid pressed on boiling milk. Behind him, the trash can swallowed something quick. I lifted the lid and saw paper strips and plastic. He reached over me and pushed the pedal harder. "Let it go tonight and heal tomorrow." His warmth crowded my shoulder and tried to claim me. I let the lid fall and the clang cut deep. Tomorrow smelled like more lies and cool tea. My spine straightened as if remembering itself. If I was wrong, I would apologize at dawn. If I was I would not be gentle. He watched me choose and did not know yet. I turned off the lights and left him in shadow. In bed, I placed my phone under my pillow. An old habit from a life before him. I typed 3 words to myself as a promise. Find proof kindly. I woke to a thud against the hallway wall. He cursed under his breath and smoothed the noise away. I kept my eyelids heavy and watched through a slit. His pocket glowed, then went dark, then bright again. I counted to 5 and slid from the sheets. The bin pedal squeaked when I pressed it gently. Crinkled wrappers lay on top like a decoy layer. Underneath, thin strips with fresh ink and numbers. A hotel name peeked through a torn date line. I palmed 3 pieces and let the lid snap. He stepped in with a practice yawn and stretch. Long night, big project, he murmured at the air. I tucked the scraps under the elastic of my waistband. My heartbeat pounded inside my throat like a small drum. He rubbed his neck and asked about breakfast without looking. Use your card today. I held up my own wallet. He blinked slow, then smiled like we shared a joke. Saving for something special, right? He tried. I shrugged and leaned on the counter for balance. He nodded once and reached for his keys. The baby monitor crackled with a short, soft cry. I moved first and his shoulders dropped a fraction. Text the client while I feed her, I said it cool. He lifted his phone and tilted the screen away. My skin prickled along the memory of last night. I changed course and opened the freezer with intent. A cluster of frozen peas fell and burst on the floor. Grab a towel, I crouched and blocked his path. He bent, phone in his back pocket, waistband low. I memorized the pattern on the case like a map. He left for a shower and took his device inside. The water roared and then stopped and then roared. I used the steam to cover my own moves. In the office, I shook the mouse with quick taps. His laptop woke up and asked for magic. 3 tries and the guest finally opened his world. Same birthday as the dog from his childhood stories. The browser bled open with synced tabs and messages. I scrolled and hit a folder named Work Late. A few threads, short, polite, and sanitized. I dug deeper and found a hidden archive symbol. He had dragged it under a bland folder title. I clicked and stared at a chat with hearts and nicknames. First message timestamp matched the torn receipt corner. I screenshotted fast and sent it to my cloud. The water cut off and I shut the lid. I returned to the kitchen with a measured breath. He walked in wearing careless ease like a jacket. Group night at church again, he smoothed his hair. Sure, I said and set the trap. I packed the diaper bag and tucked in a recorder. Not fancy, just old, just reliable, just charged. I slid it under a folded blanket and snapped it closed. He watched my hands like they might shake. They did not anymore. At group, he introduced me as resilient and brave. He spoke about healing and unity and fresh starts. He touched my shoulder while people nodded kindly. I kept my face calm and read patterns in shoes. When his pocket buzzed, his fingers twitched. During break, I asked for his phone again. Show goodwill, I said and opened my palm. He laughed quietly and tapped a lock screen code. Boundaries, he whispered and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back and left a crescent mark. Back home, he offered tea in silence and a movie. I offered laundry and a timeline and eye contact. He picked the movie and turned the volume up. I took the trash out and checked the car. The glove compartment stuck once, then gave. Inside, a loyalty card for that freeway bar. Punches marked 3 visits with tiny stamped stars. A napkin with a lipstick kiss hung to it. Not mine, not ours, not accidental. I slid it into my sleeve and shut the door. He paused the movie when he saw my face change. What now? His voice dropped almost to a growl. I set the napkin on the coffee table slowly. He looked, blinked, and smiled without teeth. That is from the office trivia night. Call the bar, I handed him my phone. He pushed it back toward me with 2 fingers. You are scaring me again with this obsession. He stood and walked to the window and back. My chest tightened, then hardened, then steadied. I opened my own phone and dialed the number. A bored voice confirmed the night and the room block. I asked about the trivia prize from last Tuesday. Free cocktails for couples, the voice said without care. I thanked them and ended the call in the same breath. He stared at the wall and rolled his shoulders once. That proves nothing except you need rest. My pulse slowed to something cold and durable. I picked up the remote and muted the show. I will rest when this stops breathing. He crossed the room and placed his hands on mine. Let us reset, his thumbs smoothed the skin. Not tea. On 8, I pulled free and stood tall. He watched me like I was a locked safe. I watched him like he was a teller. I moved to the nursery and checked the recorder. A tiny red dot blinked, steady and patient. I slipped it back and kissed the soft forehead. Quiet filled my ears with something like courage. Behind me, the hallway boards made a warning sound. He hovered in the doorway and forced a smile. We should talk in the morning and be kind. Kind sounded like a leash dressed as ribbon. I nodded once and kept my voice level. Morning will be fine if truth shows up. He left a beat later and shut the door lightly. I stood in the dim and counted slow to 50. Every number placed a brick where fear had lived. By the last count I could breathe without shaking. I tucked my phone beneath the mattress and waited. At 2, a faint vibration crawled across the dresser. I lifted the recorder and pressed the play button. His whisper filled the tiny speaker with honeyed lies. Miss you after bedtime, 10 minutes. A second voice answered with a laugh and a plan. I stopped the clip and stared at the wood grain. Proof changes nothing until you wield it. I slid the device into my pocket like a blade. Tomorrow I would use it where cameras watch. Tonight I felt the hurt where it could not rot. I walked into the pharmacy and faced the cameras. A blood pressure kiosk hummed like a witness that never blinks. I set the recorder on my knee under a folded blanket. My thumb hovered over start and then pressed down. Today I wanted names. At the counter I asked to refill nothing in particular. The clerk asked for a date of birth and an address. I gave neither and stepped aside as if remembering. My reflection in the gift display stared back hard. I texted the number from his archive with 2 words. Running late. 3 dots appeared and vanished and returned. He walked in holding a reusable bag and fake ease. His eyes slid over me once and kept moving. I let him pass and followed to the greeting cards aisle. Forgot something, I stood 2 steps away from him. He didn't turn, then he did, then froze. A small nod, a longer stare, a careful breath. You messaged me last night from a burner. His voice cut low enough to keep this public. I have audio. I tapped my pocket and watched him process. He glanced up at the camera domes and relaxed visibly. Play it and keep your distance, he folded his arms. I pressed play and held the device between us. Her laugh spilled out with my husband's whisper in time. He closed his eyes and listened to the end. When it clicked off, he opened them calmer. Meet me by the minute clinic in 10. He walked away like a man adjusting a plan. I exhaled through my teeth and followed later. I used the weight to pull names from the archive. Her contact block held a work address and a selfie. No need to dig further before a live exchange. I screen captured the header and tucked it away. Every step made the ground feel less slippery. He returned with a prepaid phone and a small notepad. Write your number that cannot be traced to him. I used a service line I kept for emergencies. He wrote his own below mine with neat strokes. Today at noon they meet near the Freeway Hotel. Lobby or bar, my voice stayed quiet and sharp. Elevator usually, then room, then lunch. His jaw worked and then settled into a hard line. We keep this here and keep kids out of it. He pointed at the camera like a referee. Agreed, I pulled the receipt scraps from my wallet. He scanned the numbers and matched them with a date. Different day, same pattern. He slid his notepad back into his bag. I will bring screenshots if you bring something cleaner. Cleaner is coming, I lifted the recorder again. I will get them on tape without any doubt. He nodded once and the nod contained something like pity. Pity is not helpful, I raised my chin. He huffed a short laugh and looked away. Does she know you reached out? I adjusted my grip. She blocked me after I questioned a late-night steak. He pinched the bridge of his nose and breathed slow. She calls him the safe one when I am at work. The word safe landed like a dare between us. I deleted the last 3 seconds of tape and tested again. No lag, no static, no dead battery surprise. The clinic door opened and an attendant called a name. He and I stood still and looked like strangers. We leave separately and never text about this again. He walked out first with shoulders squared and head down. I followed after a count of 12 for clean separation. Outside the automatic doors, I turned right toward the lot. He turned left and vanished behind a bus shelter. My back felt watched, and that helped me keep pace. In the car, I pulled up my cloud and checked uploads. The screenshot sat there waiting like stacked plates. I created a folder and gave it a clear label. No jokes, no cute titles, only function. See? And I opened Maps and set a reminder for noon. He called while I merged onto the main road. I let it ring out and waited for the beep. Forward me only proof and nothing personal. His message dropped like a stone into water. I saved it and kept my eyes forward. At home, I placed the recorder under the crib again. I set a calendar alert with a neutral name. I reheated coffee and did not drink any of it. My heart wanted speed and my head wanted aim. Aim one because it must. He tried a soft reset around 10 with a text. Lunch meeting, do you need anything from town? I typed 3 words, then erased them for leverage. Pick up wipes. Leverage sometimes looks like being ordinary on purpose. He sent a thumbs up and a wide grin sticker. I stared at the grin until my face went blank. Under that cheerful mask hid a time and a plan. He could not help showing patterns if someone looked. I looked until the angle clicked in my skull. I drove back out and parked across from the hotel. Cameras watched the entrance and the elevator bank. I carried the diaper bag over one shoulder slowly. Security glanced at the baby blanket and waved me through. The recorder blinked like a heartbeat under the fold. At the concierge desk, I asked about a rewards program. While the clerk searched, I turned so the device faced doors. Every arrival, every pause, every nervous hand to hair. I pretended to compare brochures as time crawled. My timer buzzed and my breathing steadied. He arrived first with a stiff walk and darting eyes. She followed minutes later with sunglasses and a lazy smile. They met near the elevator and traded quick words. I stepped closer and fumbled my bag deliberately. The recorder captured their voices clean and bright. Room already booked. He adjusted his belt and checked halls. Same floor as last week, her mouth tilted with habit. After we eat, we can talk about the trip. Trip flashed like a blade cutting through fog. I fixed it in memory with date and tone. The elevator opened and they moved inside. A couple stepped out and gave us space. He touched her elbow and she leaned into it. The door slid shut and cut off the view. I stared at my hands until I could move. I walked outside and called the number from the pharmacy. Check your messages in 5, my voice held no tremor. I sat in the car and backed up the audio file. Then I sent a tiny clip with their elevator exchange. A single check mark, then another, then nothing. Traffic rolled past while I waited and planned. 12 minutes 15:18. The lobby doors opened and a bell cart rattled. I started the engine but did not drive yet. The plan needed one more anchor before the hit. I texted him at home about dinner, clear and polite. He replied with a thumbs up and a heart. My stomach clenched and then loosened on command. Control is a muscle and mine finally worked. I turned the wheel and headed for the pharmacy again. I dialed her number before the car cooled. Rings stacked like hurdles and then a click. Wrong time, she breathed light and practiced. I have your elevator chat, I answered. Silence gathered like a storm with teeth. Who is this? Clipped alert already hunting angles. The wife, I said and watched pedestrians flow. You should block me, she tried, smooth and distant. Meet me at the Minute Clinic counter, I offered. Or I forward audio to HR in one tap. A long exhale came through like a held plank. Half an hour, she said, then cut the line. I messaged the other spouse one word. Now. His reply pinged back, I'm parked behind the bakery. Inside the clinic, I took a queue ticket. She arrived with large sunglasses and a quick scan. We stood beside a rack of cough drops. I pressed play for 8 seconds and stopped. Delete that, she whispered, jaw tight. Not a chance, I answered and let it hang. Then what? She asked and folded her arms. You ended on speaker while I record, I said. Her mouth twitched like she tasted metal. You think he listens to anyone? That is your problem, I said without raising volume. Here is mine, he used my illness as cover. Her eyes flickered and then steadied on me. That line is his favorite trick, she muttered. The admission opened a door I would use. I moved 2 steps away and texted him. Running errands, I wrote and put the phone down. She lifted her chin like a runner at blocks. Call him, I said. Say we are finished and mean it. She dialed and turned the screen so I could see. Hey, she started light then went straight. We are done today, no more rooms, no trip. The speaker filled with his careful pause and sugar. Talk later, came the answer, lazy and certain. I shook my head and held up one finger. Again but harder, I said, steady and plain. She squared up and tried once more with force. No later, no anything, do not message me. Another soft dodge, you are upset, breathe. I raised the recorder and spoke toward it. Exhibit A, I said and let the failure land. She snapped her phone shut and faced me. He thinks he owns outcomes, she said, bitter and bright. I can root around him if you want. Rude how? I asked and watched her posture shift. He trusts my car, she said with a grim smile. He hides spare clothes in my trunk for quick exits. I blinked once and decided the next step. We borrow those clothes and crash his routine. She hesitated and then nodded once. 30 minutes, she said and moved fast. I followed to the lot and climbed into my car. She pulled alongside and popped her trunk. A canvas duffel stared up like a secret. We carried it to my vehicle without fuss. Inside, a folded receipt fell from the zipper. Different bar, different date, matching pattern. I shot a photo and slid it back. She watched my hands and understood the plan. We lure him into daylight, I said, crisp and calm. Public place cameras, name spoken clearly. She looked at the clinic door and measured risk. Fine, she said and tucked a strand behind her ear. Use my phone and message him as me. I typed slowly to avoid tripping alarms. Same hotel, noon, bring the key. 3 dots appeared and vanished like baited fish. A reply landed with swagger, on my way. I handed the device back and locked the clip. We split routes and reconvened near the lobby. I took the concierge line with a polite face. She loitered by the elevator with a bottle of water. My recorder faced the doors like an open eye. My pulse beat a steady cadence under my ribs. He entered wearing weekend ease and a tight jaw. He scanned, saw her, and softened at once. I stepped forward and lifted my phone like a badge. Room number and last name, please, I said loud. The concierge looked up with helpful reflex. He pivoted hard and blocked the counter with his shoulder. Stop, he murmured. Owen, sharp eyes on me. I kept my gaze on the employee and smiled. Actually, never mind, I found my key, I said. Then I turned to him and lifted the recorder. Say her name for the record, I said calmly. He stared at the blinking light and weighed outcomes. She is a colleague, he tried, voice even and careful. Names only, I said and tilted my head. He inhaled and delivered one, full, first and last. I met the concierge eye and nodded like thanks. Behind us, cameras watched and hummed in their housings. He reached for my wrist and I drew back. Let's talk privately, he urged, jaw flexed. Here is private enough, I answered without volume. Do not make a scene, he warned, almost pleading now. You made it already, I said with a small shrug. Finish it, tell her it's over for good. He looked at the woman by the doors and hesitated. She lifted her chin and waited like a judge. End it, I repeated and lowered the recorder slightly. He rolled his tongue against his teeth and nodded once. Over, he told her and spread his hands. Leave me alone and move on. Her mouth curved into something like relief and fear. I hit stop and saved the file with one tap. He saw the name of the folder and flinched. Stop documenting our marriage, he said in a whisper. Start behaving like you have one, I returned. He glanced past me at guests now pretending not to watch. Family image matters, he murmured, desperate and controlled. You are hurting yourself, he added with practiced concern. I stepped closer and kept my tone soft. You coached me to apologize to your affair, I said. That part ends today on my terms. He took a breath and tried a softer pitch. I can fix this if you let me lead. My laugh came short and empty like a snap. You used my diagnosis to manage suspicion, I said. Leadership requires honesty and you have none. He reached for the duffel in my backseat memory. Give me my things, he snapped under his breath. Later, I said and tipped my head toward the desk. I am checking with security about footage retention. He swallowed, then followed me to the counter. Hello, I greeted with a crisp professional tone. What is your policy on lobby recordings? The clerk described a window and a process for requests. I wrote down the request form link very clearly. He watched the pen move and understood my next move. We stepped aside and he tried a new track. Let's attend group tonight and show unity. I shook my head and kept my voice even. You orchestrated unity while booking rooms, I said. He stared at the carpet like reading a prayer. My phone buzzed with the other spouse's number. Ready for the drop, the text read. I pictured the pharmacy cameras and the minute clinic. Meet me in 10, I replied, quick and final. Then I looked at my husband and planned the handoff. Your extra clothes are in my trunk, I told him. He frowned and his eyes narrowed a fraction. You stored evidence in another woman's car, I added. Rage flashed and then hid under his cool tone. Give them to me now. I walked toward the exit and he trailed close. The woman stayed back and watched with a clenched jaw. I opened my vehicle and lifted the canvas bag. He reached, but I set it down on the asphalt. Inventory in front of the camera, I said. He crouched and unzipped like a man disarming a bomb. Shirts, belt, hotel key, sleeves. He tried to palm one sleeve and slide it away. I tapped his wrist with 2 fingers. Hands visible, I said, crisp and sure. He straightened and stood in my space. You cannot survive alone, he murmured with softness. I smiled without warmth and took a step left. Watch me, I said, and locked the car. He blinked and the mask slipped a millimeter. The woman approached and placed her phone on the bag. Block me, she told him, steady and drained. Do it now and then leave. He stared at her screen and then at me. I raised my eyebrows and waited for action. He typed quickly and held the phone up. Blocked, he announced with false finality. I took a photo of the screen for record. Congratulations, I said. Now walk to your car and keep moving. He looked like a man deciding whether to flip a table. Then he turned and did as instructed without flair. We watched him cross the lot and vanish behind a van. The woman exhaled and rubbed her forearm hard. Your move, she said without looking at me. My move is pharmacy at noon, I answered. Then lawyer, then therapist, then locks. She nodded and pocketed her device with shaky grace. I will send you his calendar entries, she said. Use them however you need. I slid into my seat and started the engine. A new strength settled in where shaking used to live. My reflection in the rearview held my eye. I drove to the clinic with the recorder still armed. The day was not done and neither was I. The other spouse waited by the blood pressure kiosk. I placed the Duff L between us and flipped it open. He scanned the contents and lifted the key sleeves. Copies, he whispered and his mouth tightened. Your audio matches these times. I handed him the file with names and timestamps. Our footprints line up like tracks in wet cement, I said. He nodded and slipped the proof into a plain folder. Next we alert HR with neutral language, he said. Facts only, no flair, no adverbs. I agreed and opened a new email draft. Subject line simple, attachments labeled with dates. We wrote 2 sentences each and checked them twice. Then we pressed send and sat very still. The quiet hummed with consequences. My phone buzzed with a message from home. Dinner plan still good, the text read, chirpy and bright. I answered with one word that tasted like steel. Sure. Then I muted the thread and stared at the floor. The other spouse touched the recorder and met my gaze. You will be okay, he said without decoration. Okay is later, I replied and stood. Right now is action and edges. He nodded and followed me to the door. I drove back to the house and unlocked slowly. He sat at the table with 2 plates and a grin. Great day, he offered and poured sparkling water. I set my keys down and opened my mouth. Tomorrow you move to the couch, I told him. His face flickered through confusion and calculation. You cannot punish me for imagined crimes, he started. I lifted my phone and tapped the new clip. His voice filled the room from the hotel lobby. He went quiet and stared at his hands. I will not hide this, I said, clear and measured. I am done apologizing to your escape hatch. He leaned back and tried one last pivot. Think of the baby, he urged, low and urgent. I am, I said, and that ended the discussion. I gathered my folder and walked down the hall. Behind me he sat, breathing short and shallow. I shut the bedroom door and locked it once. The click sounded like a gavel inside my chest. Morning would bring the next strike. He woke on the couch and reached for his phone. I watched from the doorway with the recorder in my palm. Ground rules, I said and set a paper on the table. Location sharing, no private channels, full access on request. He scratched his jaw and smirked like a teenager caught. Control issues, he muttered and pushed the list away. I flipped the recorder on without ceremony and waited. Say you agree, I said and held his gaze. He stretched slow, then nodded with a theatrical sigh. I saved the file and left the room on purpose. By the sink I dialed the hotel front desk. Retention policy for lobby footage, I asked, steady and brief. A clerk gave a time window and a reference number. I wrote it down and snapped a photo for backup. He hovered nearby and pretended not to listen. Why are you escalating? He asked with a shiny concern. Because silence fed this, I answered without heat. He rubbed both hands over his face and paced. Let us keep family matters inside the walls. I opened my cloud folder where nothing stayed inside. I called a legal office from the patio with wind cover. A paralegal booked a same-day consult and listed documents. Statements, calendar entries, any audio with clear dates. I confirmed and ended the call with a calm breath. Inside, he stared at me like I had grown armor. He followed me to the bedroom door and tapped lightly. Choose compassion, he whispered, trying for soft authority. Choose transparency, I returned and checked the baby monitor. I transferred money to an essentials account with my name. His jaw clenched when the bank app chimed twice. Are you hiding funds? He asked with a tilted head. Protecting diapers and rent, I said and locked my screen. He walked to the kitchen and banged a drawer shut. Noise instead of truth had become his favorite move. I let the noise pass and kept building. He reappeared with a tray and a bright mood. Peace offering, he announced and set it near me. I smelled sweetness and guilt and set it aside. Use your brightness on an apology text, I said. He blinked and reached for excuses that did not land. Draft it, I continued and slid a notepad forward. One sentence, no poetry, no blame, no hints. He scribbled 3 lines and tried to hand it over. I pushed it back and tapped the top line once. We are finished today, he read like a hostage. Now your signature, I said and angled the page. He laughed through his nose and dropped the pen. You will weaponize this with strangers, he warned. I will protect myself with writing, I corrected calmly. He signed with a flourish he would soon regret. I photographed the page and opened a clean message. I typed each word while he watched every letter. Then I sent it to a protected number for safekeeping. He exhaled and tried a smile that did not reach. My phone buzzed with a quiet confirmation I needed. I stepped into the hallway and called the other spouse. Wait, have a written break, I said and kept it tight. Meet in 20 at the coffee kiosk, he answered. I grabbed the folder and tucked the recorder inside. From the living room came a muttered curse and shuffle. At the kiosk he arrived first with a rigid posture. I handed him the signed sentence without commentary. He scanned it and slid a flash drive across. Calendar entries with shared blocks, he said, brisk and clear. I pocketed it and checked my watch for the next beat. We walked to the parking garage to keep our voices small. He showed a printed timeline with checkmarks and gaps. Today's window shows another lunch, he said with a frown. Different venue near the river, he added and tapped twice. I took a photo and marked the hour in my head. On the drive home, I listened to last night's clip. His pet name for her cut through the speaker clean. I clipped the exact segment and labeled it with time. Then I stored it in 3 locations just in case. Insurance grows teeth when you treat it like steel. He was folding laundry when I came back inside. Progress, he announced with a forced lightness. I set my phone down and watched his hands move. Call your pastor and ask for a private talk, I said. He hesitated and then dialed while I recorded the tone. Tonight, he told the phone with new humility. He hung up and studied my face for a thaw. Thank you, I said and held the recorder near my hip. He stepped closer and lowered his voice to a purr. We can rebuild if you stop collecting. Confession builds faster than charm, I answered flat. He glanced at the bassinet and softened his mouth. Do not break our home, he murmured and touched my sleeve. I took a step back and watched his mask slide. Control dressed as care always slips under light. I opened the laptop and logged into his web account. Password unchanged, same lazy pattern, same false confidence. A message draft to her sat unfinished in the outbox. Later today, same room, quick escape. I screenshotted and forwarded it to my locked folder. He noticed my posture and moved to block the screen. Stop snooping, he warned with a finger on the lid. Stop plotting, I returned and shut the computer myself. I held out my palm and waited without blinking. He placed the laptop on the dresser with a shrug. I texted the woman a single sentence from my number. He signed a no-contact line this morning. 3 dots appeared and then a stark reply. Good, he will test it by sunset. I saved that, then silenced the thread for noise control. At noon, I parked near the riverfront restaurant. Camera domes watched the walkway and patio quietly. I walked past a planter and pretended to tie a shoe. The recorder lay snug in the stroller pocket, ready and mute. He arrived with his shoulders squared and a neutral smile. She joined with a scarf and a glance that cut. They took a table near the railing with clear view. I ordered water at the counter and chose a line. Close enough for audio, far enough for deniability. I held my phone like another bored customer listening. Blocked but not broken, she teased with half interest. Just noise at home, he answered with a careless shrug. Tonight we will regroup and plan the trip, she offered. He checked the walkway and leaned in a fraction. After bedtime, he whispered, almost proud of the echo. I stood and moved to the exit as if distracted. The recorder captured the lines in their little laugh. Outside, I exhaled once through a tight throat. Then I walked to the corner and called the paralegal. We have fresh confirmation, I said, and asked for time. Bring everything at 4, she replied without ceremony. I drove to the office with my folder under my arm. In the waiting room, I arranged files by date and source. A woman in a blazer invited me in with a nod. I sat and set the recorder on the table like a witness. We went through items one by one at speed. Signed sentence, audio of future plans, calendar overlap. She explained options in short, clear steps. Temporary separation with boundaries, possession of the home. Document every contact, no fights, no scenes. She handed me a draft letter for immediate service. A messenger could deliver it tomorrow morning at 9. I approved and signed where she pointed efficiently. She told me to change 2 passwords before sunset. Then she stood and shook my hand with firm gravity. On the sidewalk, my phone lit up with 2 messages. Meet at church at 6 from him with a heart. HR requested a call at 3 from the other spouse. I prioritized and dialed the office number first. A coordinator confirmed receipt and scheduled an interview. I drove to the church lot and parked across the street. Inside my chest, the old panic tried to wake. I kept it down with a simple sentence I could trust. You act and then you breathe. Breathing came back like a skill I had reclaimed. He waited inside with a notebook and an open expression. Thank you for coming, he greeted with practiced warmth. We sat facing a counselor who watched our hands more than faces. He launched into a narrative about stress and miscommunication. I let him run until he reached the word rebuild. Pause, I said, and placed the recorder on the cushion. I have recordings and signed statements, I continued steadily. We will not discuss feelings until facts sit on the table. The counselor raised a brow and looked between us slowly. My husband pressed his lips together and nodded once. Do you want recovery or just quiet? I asked him. He swallowed hard and reached for my fingers halfway. I didn't move and waited for something real. I want our family, he answered with deliberate calm. Then offer truth without framing, I said, and leaned back. I met her during a crunch, he started and stopped. He breathed deep and tried again with less polish. I liked being admired and I let it grow. I stared until he continued without decoration. I lied and I used your diagnosis as cover. The counselor turned to me with a slow nod. I watched my husband's shoulders drop a fraction. I will end contact, he said, softer than usual. Already done, I answered and showed the sign line. He blinked at his own handwriting like it betrayed him. We will separate bedrooms, I continued and kept momentum. You will send a message acknowledging the affair. He recoiled and then caught himself with a tiny smile. That hurts our image, he warned with low urgency. Image dies today, I said and left him staring. I stood and gathered my folder with measured movements. We are done for tonight, I told the counselor. Tomorrow a letter arrives at 9, I added plainly. My husband flinched at the exact time and looked away. I walked out without waiting for permission or blessing. In the corridor, he caught up and touched my elbow. Please wait, he murmured, voice rough and strained. I stopped beneath the exit sign and faced him. You ask for mercy while planning a rendezvous, I said. His eyes darted, then steadied on some private script. I canceled that lunch, he lied with a bare face. I lifted my phone and played the river clip. His own whisper filled the narrow space like a verdict. He closed his mouth and pressed his fist against the wall. I stepped sideways and let the silence pound him. At home, I packed a small bag with essentials. I placed it by the door where he could see it. He watched me from the threshold with rigid calm. Punishment will not cure you, he tried one more time. Boundaries will, I answered and locked the deadbolt behind me. I messaged the other spouse 3 words on the porch. For tomorrow morning. He replied with a thumbs up and a single period. I stared at that period until it looked like an anchor. Then I went back inside and set alarms for dawn. The crib camera blinked quietly in the corner. I checked the recorder's remaining storage and cleared old files. Only today's proof remained in the device memory. I placed it under the bassinet with the wire tucked neatly. He watched the ritual and finally understood my readiness. Can we sleep? He asked from the hallway, calm and thin. You can, I replied and walked past without touching him. He stood there with his hands useless at his sides. I closed the nursery door and leaned against it once. Morning would carry the last piece into place. The knock hit at 9 sharp like a metronome. He moved first toward the door with quick steps. I cut across the hall and blocked his grip. Back up, I said and turned the deadbolt. The envelope slid into my palm like a blade. He tried to laugh and shape it into a joke. I opened it and read the first line aloud. Temporary occupancy, financial freeze on joint extras. He stared at the heading and lost his smile. I raised my phone and tapped record without blinking. State your name for acknowledgement, I said and held steady. His mouth curled and then flattened under the lens. He spoke it slow as if stalling the clock. I saved the clip to 3 folders while he watched. He looked smaller for the first time and knew it. Where do I sleep? He asked with thin politeness. Office or couch, I answered and handed him a blanket. You stay away from our room and the nursery. He rubbed his brow and paced a short line. I stood still and let him burn energy. The doorbell rang again with a lighter rhythm. A courier held a box with the locksmith sticker. I signed and carried it to the table fast. He stepped forward and I raised a palm once. You keep distance until I finish, I warned. The locksmith's video guide chirped through my speaker. I followed steps and swapped the deadbolt cleanly. He watched my hands and understood the new order. He looked at his old key like a museum piece. I placed it in a drawer he could not open. His phone buzzed with a new message on the counter. He lunged for it and stopped halfway under my stare. I slid the device across and set a timer. 10 minutes to inform your contact that it is over. He nodded once and began typing with stiff fingers. Read it out loud, I said without heat. He swallowed and started slow and stripped. I am ending this now and will not meet again. She replied with a single dot and then silence. He set the phone down like it burned his hand. Good, I said and saved a screenshot quietly. He caught the motion and rolled his shoulders like a fighter. You enjoy this control, he muttered toward the floor. I enjoy safety, I answered and checked the monitor. The baby shifted and settled back without a sound. I need my calendar for work, he tried with care. Use the family laptop on the dining chair, I replied. No personal windows, no disappearing tabs. He opened the browser and stared at the blank page. I stood behind him and watched the cursor blink. A new email jumped in with a stern subject. HR scheduled a call for noon with compliance present. He inhaled too quickly and clicked into it. I took a photo of the screen before he moved. He closed the window and rubbed his temples hard. Stop documenting, he snapped and pushed the chair back. Start choosing truth, I said and picked up the envelope. I read the clause about temporary custody rights slowly. He winced at the phrase supervised exchanges at home. I circled it with a pen and underlined twice. I am not a danger, he barked with frayed pride. Then follow rules and prove it, I said evenly. He paced again and picked at his thumbnail. I will cooperate for our child, he forced out. The words hung like wet clothes on a line. My phone chimed with a calendar alarm from the firm. Document assets today before he moves items. I opened the camera and walked room to room. He trailed me, quiet now, counting under his breath. I photographed once and never explained my angles. At the closet, I found the mouthwash bottle moved. Inside the cap, a backup SIM card sat snug. I held it up between 2 fingers without comment. He looked down and pressed his lips together hard. I dropped it into a plastic bag and labeled it. He tried another pivot with a soft tone. Let's cook lunch and breathe, he murmured carefully. Order delivery if you want food, I replied. I have calls and forms in Lux. He exhaled and stared at the wall until blinking. The other spouse texted a screenshot of HR's reply. Interviews split to avoid conflict. Documentation required today. I sent back the signed sentence and today's audio. He responded with 2 words and a time. We meet at 1 behind the kiosk. I dialed my therapist and hit the on-call button. Short check-in, I said when the line opened. I am not panicking, I am acting in calm. She asked for 1 sentence of commitment under stress. I will keep words short and decisions reversible. I hung up and returned to the living room. He stood near the window with his phone dangling. Please do not tell your family yet, he said. They can learn after the interview if it goes bad. I stared until he looked down and shuffled away. The door swung open at 11 with a soft squeak. Our friend from church stepped in with a casserole gesture. She froze at the tension in the air and stared. He started a greeting and tripped over his mouth. I lifted my hand and cut the scene cleanly. Not a visit, I told her and held the door. Emergency boundaries only, we will call later. Her eyes flicked between our faces like reading a chart. She set the dish down on the threshold without entering. He reached toward her and I shook my head once. She stepped back and nodded with tight control. Text if you need a ride, she offered quietly. I closed the door and turned the lock again. He rubbed his face like sandpaper and blew air. I picked up the envelope and checked the service page. Pack a bag for the office, I said gently. 3 shirts, a notebook, and your charger. He looked at me as if I had issued exile. Temporary separation helps us not tear the house, I added. He nodded with a jerky motion and left the room. The baby's cry rose thin and immediate through the monitor. I went in and lifted the warm little weight with care. He appeared in the doorway with his hands empty. Do you want help? He asked in a low tone. Wash bottles and stay useful, I answered and swayed. He moved to the sink and turned on the water. He worked quickly and quietly like a drafted soldier. I listened for mutters and heard none at all. The bottle rack filled like a checklist in order. A small visible effort, not a full repair. At 11:30, I texted the other spouse again. On track for 1. He answered with a single check mark and a period. I strapped the baby into the stroller with steady hands. He dried his fingers and watched from 3 steps back. I will be here for the noon call, he said. Speakerphone and recorder, I reminded without emotion. He held up his palms like a stage magician. No tricks, he promised with a forced grin. I opened the door and rolled the stroller forward. The air felt thin and manageable like an empty list. I reached the lot and set the stroller brake. The other spouse waved from his car and approached briskly. We stood beside the camera dome and compared notes. He handed me a printed log with today's times. HR will press on travel expenses, he said quietly. Your audio with the elevator matters, he added. I slid him a copy on a labeled thumb drive. He tucked it into his jacket pocket with a nod. We both looked like people who forgot how to shake. My husband called at noon on the dot. I put him on speaker and set the recorder close. Compliance asked direct questions and waited through pauses. He dodged twice and then stepped into truth. Physical relationship, he said, clear and unadorned. The line crackled as someone typed furiously. I watched the other spouse's jaw release at the word. Policy breach confirmed, the voice announced in monotone. They scheduled a follow-up and ended the call. I saved the file and checked that it uploaded. My husband texted immediately after with a short burst. We need to talk when you return. I wrote back a single sentence without sugar. Pick up toiletries and stay at the office tonight. His typing bubble appeared and then vanished for good. I wheeled the stroller toward the pharmacy entrance. We stopped by the kiosk like the start of a race. I played the clip again for the other spouse's archive. We both stood still while our choices rearranged. Then we split without hugging or promises. Back home, I found him in the hallway with a bag. He had packed poorly and tried to look competent. Keys, I said and held out my hand. He placed the ring in my palm without a word. I kept the house key and returned the car fob. Can I say goodbye? He asked and pointed toward the crib. Yes, I answered and watched his posture become gentle. He touched the small foot with 2 fingers and paused. A quiet sound escaped him and vanished quickly. He turned away and put that softness back in a box. At the door, he lingered like a man fearing weather. I want us intact, he said with careful diction. Intact requires honesty sustained over time, I replied. Start with silence toward her and visible schedules. He nodded and stepped onto the porch without flair. I closed the door and locked it for the 3rd time. The house settled around me like a held breath. I marked the separation date on a calendar page. Then I opened the laptop and changed 2 passwords. The bank pinged me with a confirmation I saved. A new email landed from HR addressed to both parties. Administrative leave for him pending conclusion. Required counseling sessions, restricted access to systems. He forwarded it to me with a shaky emoji. I let the message sit and did not respond. I called the firm and confirmed service was complete. The assistant logged my updates and thanked me. She reminded me to keep conversations short and neutral. I repeated the reminder out loud until it stuck. Neutral wins court and spares energy. As afternoon thinned, the silence felt purposeful, not empty. I cleaned the kitchen with small, efficient movements. Not a ritual, just motion while the baby napped. My hands remembered the old panic and then forgot. For once, forgetting worked like a tool. He texted around 5 with a final question. Do you want me at group tonight? I typed slowly and used the exact number of words. Attend alone if you plan to confess in full. The typing bubble started and then died like a spark. I carried the stroller to the porch and took a seat. The street moved in its regular rhythm without us. I thought about the woman from the lobby and paused. She had sent a last message an hour earlier. Block activated and calendar cleared. I opened the recorder and removed the memory card. I sealed it in an envelope with the reference number. Then I put the envelope in the safe place. No grand finale, no spectacle, only structure. Structure held while everything else rearranged. Car door shut in the driveway around 6. I stood and watched through the peephole with care. He placed the extra key on the mat and stepped back. No note, no speech, just a nod at the door. I let the nod pass through me without catching. I fed the baby and listened to the soft rhythm. My mind tried to sprint and then obeyed the pace. I whispered a promise I could actually keep. We will live by facts and kindness without pretense. The words surprised me with their weight. The phone buzzed with a final evening update. HR scheduled my interview for morning at 9. I texted the other spouse a simple confirmation. Then I put the device face down and exhaled. No more chasing tonight, only rest. Before sleep, I set 3 alarms in a neat row. 1 for the interview, 1 for the locksmith follow-up. 1 for the first appointment with the counselor alone. Each time slot felt like a rung on a ladder. I climbed in my head until fear looked small. In bed, I typed 1 text to myself again. Find proof kindly had carried me to the door. Tonight I wrote a different line with steady thumbs. Hold boundaries gently and do not move them. I saved it and closed my eyes with purpose.